Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is a very old and dear friend. I don't mean that in an ugly way, Judge, but we are in a bit of a reversed role here. But I'm delighted to have Judge U.W. Clemon with us today. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Tommy. It's a real pleasure to be with you on this show.
You know, I've worked as a lawyer for 45 years, and I just learned, for 54 years, 50-something years, 50 plus years.
I've been a lawyer in Alabama since 1968.
I was a junior in high school at that point in my life, not to date myself, but tell us a little bit about your career. I know you were a federal district court judge and our chief judge for a number of years, and in private practice now, but before getting there, what did you do with your life?
I'm a product of Fairfield, Alabama, son of Mississippi sharecroppers who migrated to Birmingham 2 years before my birth. I grew up in a town called Westfield, wholly owned by United States Steel. I applied to Birmingham Southern College in my senior year of high school, was rejected because of my race. Started out at Morehouse College in Atlanta, and then came back to Miles College here in Birmingham, where I participated in the selective buying campaign of 1962, and the following year in Martin Luther King's Birmingham demonstrations. I graduated from Miles in 1955, from Columbia Law School in 1968, practiced for 12 years as a civil rights lawyer, and during that time I served as a state senator. And in 1980, President Carter appointed me as Alabama's first black federal judge.
Wow, what a history. So I'm going to assume that throughout that very short version of decades of time, you've observed a lot of change. In some ways.
I have seen literally the world turn upside down in terms of relationships between blacks and whites and the direction in which the country is headed. I'm nearly an octogenarian. As of April of next year, if it's God's will, I will be 80 years old. And many things have changed, a lot of them for the better.
Sometimes I think we take one step forward and two steps back in our universe that we're currently living in. But I'd like to think we're moving at least in the right direction most of the time.
Is that a fair assessment?
For most of my lifetime, we have been moving in the right direction. However, in the last 6 years, we have seen, for the first time in American history, an attempt to overturn this country's dedication to its Constitution. I have not seen that before in my lifetime, even in the darkest days of racial segregation. I did not see at the national level, any effort to try to change the democratic direction to which this country is dedicated.
And now, of course, it feels like sometimes people are trying, what you just mentioned is a thought that would not have even entered your mind, I would think, until recently.
It is certainly true that that thought would not have entered my mind 10 years ago.
Or even 8 years ago.
Or even 8 years ago.
So we're going to talk about in this segment something about the future of our country. But right now, what I see in not just national government, but also in local governments, one of the basic principles of our country is the separation of powers that exists between the various branches of the government. In my opinion, as limited as it may be, there seems to be some blurred line between that, which is a principal foundation of the formation of the government that we have. Am I correct in my assessment of that?
Yes, I have detected a direction which our country should avoid, and that is of blurring the lines between the various branches of government. Because to ignore those lines is to promote anarchy, where we don't have separate and distinct lines between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative branches. Then the protections that the country ordinarily affords to its citizens are lost.
And the whole principle behind that was, quote, checks and balances.
Yes, sir. Our country is founded on the notion that each branch of the government serves as a check on the authority of the other branch. And what we've seen in recent years is an attempt by the executive branch to usurp the powers and prerogatives of both the judicial and the legislative branches of government.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break and maybe talk some more about those issues. We'll be right back. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Don't go away. And welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm speaking with Judge U.W. Clemon. We're talking about state of affairs in our country. Once we got past about talking about his illustrious history, we're very appreciative of your service to this area and to our country in general, but particularly in our judiciary. There's talk, because people are concerned that the Supreme Court of the United States has gotten itself in a position where that blurred line we were talking about recently, it appears to be creeping in. I mean, I don't want to believe it because I'm a lawyer, and I don't want to think that's what our judiciary is about, because I do believe in the separation of powers. But do you think we need to do something about that? Add more members of the Supreme Court? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in my judgment, the judicial branch of the government, with no army, no finances, is the most important of the three branches of government. I happen to have served once in the legislative branch, but even so, I believe that the judicial branch of government gives hope and substance to our Constitution. It tells us at any particular point in history exactly what the Constitution means. And what we have seen in the Trump administration is an attempt to take over the Supreme Court, to appoint to the court persons who will do the will of President Trump. And unfortunately, he has been able to appoint judges to the district and appellate courts who are not committed to the independence of the judiciary, a hallmark of our system. We presently have 9 justices of the Supreme Court, and that's been so since around Abraham Lincoln's time. But it was not always so. There was a point in our history where we had as few as 7 justices. And it's important to know that under our Constitution, Congress decides the number of justices for the court. And since 1866, the country has grown by leaps and bounds. All kinds of new problems have emerged, issues formed, and in my judgment, it's high time to expand the court so that it can give a more balanced consideration to the growing interests and concerns of the country. There have been times when the court has been basically insensitive to some of the pressing needs of the people. And I guess the most important instance of that was the Dobbs case, the abortion case, just last year, where a solid majority of the Supreme Court, for the first time in history, took away an established constitutional right. And I believe that if the court had been a larger court, more broadly representative of the people who live in this country, I think that kind of result would not have taken place.
Well, when you speak of taking away a constitutional right, I think what you have to understand that it's not enumerated in the Constitution that is a right. That right is drawn from what we call in the lawyer speak as the penumbra, the umbrella. Am I correct there?
That is correct, but it's equally important to remember what ex-Chief Charles Evans Hughes once said, and that is the Constitution at any given time is no more or no less than whatever 5 of the justices say that it means. And so 5 justices said over 50 years ago that there was a constitutional right to an abortion. How it reached that decision is not of consequence, but it did establish a broad-based constitutional right of a woman to determine how her body is to be used. And that right has been respected from that point in time up to now. And each of the present justices of the Supreme Court who was confirmed after the Roe decision was announced has given at least lip service to that decision.
And they wouldn't tinker with it?
But once they donned the judicial robe and confirmed by the Senate, they forgot the pledges that they made and remembered the implicit pledge that they made to President Trump, and that is that they would overturn Roe v. Wade.
Hold it right there. It's a sensitive subject, I'm sure you're aware. And I'm sure it's stirring up a lot of conversation out there. At least I hope it is, because that's a good thing. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We're going to take a short break and come back and talk about where we're headed from here in just a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm Tommy Spina, and we're speaking with Judge U.W. Clemon today about lots of things that are very sensitive and actually impact all of us, even though you may not feel it. It's bigger than the issue that we just addressed. It's a philosophy, it's a mindset. And in these appointments that were just referenced, that's not a blanket accusation against all of the appointments that were made. It was clear that some of the appointments...
It is certain that many of President Trump's appointments to the Supreme Court deeply respect and honor their obligation to follow the law. And the best evidence of that is a decision last week by the 11th Circuit, 3-judge panel, all of them appointed by Republican presidents, one by President Bush, 2 others by President Trump.
One of our local judges was on that panel.
Yes. And they all said that another judge, lower court judge, Judge Cannon, some call Judge Loose Cannon,
had overstepped her bounds.
Had no right to interfere in an ongoing criminal investigation, even though a former president was the subject of that investigation.
So
and they showed their faithfulness, their dedication to the independence of the judiciary, which is so crucial to the functioning of our system. The Chief Justice, Chief Judge of the 11th Circuit, Judge Pryor, was appointed by President Bush, lives here in Birmingham, clerked for one of my heroes, Judge John Minor Wisdom of the old 5th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Well, that's going back in time.
Yes, it is.
I remember those days. That was 1978 when that split occurred. We're talking about the fact that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Florida, Georgia, Alabama, used to be also a part of the 5th Circuit, which covered, in addition to those 3 states,
well,
Texas,
let me just
and
say
some more.
this. The old 5th Circuit Court of Appeals was the most liberal circuit in the nation. It covered Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, and Texas.
Louisiana, too?
And Louisiana. And I had some hand in preventing the split of the 5th Circuit in 1977, 78, because the way that they proposed to split it was to put 4 circuits, including Mississippi, in one circuit, and Texas and Louisiana, where the most liberal judges were, including Judge Wisdom, in a new circuit, the 11th Circuit. Yes.
States.
Yeah, and so we opposed it, testified before the House Judiciary Committee, and they didn't split it then. It was not split until 1981.
Yeah, that's when I was a baby lawyer. So what do you see for the future?
Well, as I see it, somehow this country has got to come to grips with what we call the peculiar institution of slavery and its aftermaths. It's got to come to what the Bible and Jesus teach us about loving each other, about doing to another like we would have done unto us.
More of a New Testament philosophy?
It is a philosophy grounded in our Judeo-Christian heritage, but it is a philosophy that we've talked about so many years, but have fallen so far short of the mark.
Very
And
simple.
It is very simple because we are all humans created equally, and we ought to act that way. But we don't. I'm hoping that in the upcoming years, most Americans will respect the fact that we owe our allegiance as Americans first to our Constitution, not to a political party, and that we will act in the best interest of the country in the years ahead.
And the Constitution that represents all people.
Yes,
All
sir.
people.
Yes, sir. The Constitution was imperfect in its origin. But with the Civil War and the enactment of the Civil War amendments, particularly the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, that guarantee of equality is, I think, a bedrock principle that this country must commit itself to if we are to save ourselves as a democracy.
From ourselves.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us. I cannot tell you what a pleasure this has been.
It's been my genuine pleasure to be with you, Tommy, always.
It was a great show.
In court and out of court.
Well, thank you. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next Sunday.